everyone. Welcome today to Mystic Megan's Astro Guide to the Universe. I am here today with a parenting astrologer, lawyer, and author, Maria Riegger. I'm so excited about this interview today that we've set up. Today's Wednesday, April 28th at 1 p.m. and we're recording from Vermont. So hi, Maria.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. Super exciting.
Yes. So I met Maria online through Dominique's parenting and astrology Facebook group, which has a lot of really cool astrologers and information in there. And we connected through there. And I was particularly interested in Maria's work, one, from being a lawyer, having this legal background, I just found fascinating. You know, how do you go from law to astrology? It's quite, and a fiction writer. And I love writing as well. So I'm so interested about how you've combined your different passions and skills into being where you're at now with your career.
Sure. So it's a little unusual for like a corporate attorney to be into astrology, and like I'm a Gemini sun, so I come from a place more of logic, right, and detachment more than kind of emotion and intuition. But so I've been into astrology for a long time, and originally I took a very logical take on it, thinking, well, there's no reason that I can see that the position of the planets at the moment of somebody's birth would have any effect on their personality or the way they behave in relationships or the way they pursue their goals or their outlook on life. But the more I looked at the patterns, the more I saw, these patterns that people with similar energies tended to have certain characteristics, or at least express the characteristics in a certain way. And over time, you see so many patterns that you come to the conclusion that there is something of value here, even if you don't know exactly why it works. That does not mean that there's no value, right? So, and interestingly, when I started studying astrology seriously, a lot of the really well-known astrologers, like Robert Hand, Stephen Arroyo, they come from very analytical backgrounds and they're very data driven. Like they look at studies and they parse data. And Stephen Arroyo has a degree in psychology and other sciences, some hard sciences. So that was very interesting to me. They kind of combined almost like a scientific process with studying astrology. Again, not necessarily knowing exactly why it works, but realizing there's some value to it.
Yeah, I love that. I also found a similar sort of entrance in, like, the work of Hand was super influential in me. I remember a podcast of Chris Brennan's I listened to recently, and he was talking about how, like, well, he was interviewing the critics of astrology. I think it was that one I'm thinking of, and something about, like, you might not understand how a car drives, everything about it, but it still works, like, whether or not you understand all the mechanics of it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's and I think as being a Gemini sun, that's kind of interesting also, like the double, like you've got this astrology side and your legal side.
Right. I like practicing law. Like I love that. And I mean, I've read that that's an area that Gemini sometimes gravitate to, because we love language. We're pretty good at using language to, precise language to articulate things, to really parse language, be very particular. That's why when I tell parents of Gemini kids, like, you've got to give the kids very precise instructions. If you have an idea in your mind of what you want, but you're too vague, they won't understand what you're talking about. You'll be frustrated with them, but it's because Geminis take language very specifically, like very particularly, and they're very precise about using language, and they're usually, they have some skill at writing, so they make, generally, stereotype at least is that they make good attorneys, right? So I like the law. I loved law school. I like practicing law, just that it doesn't really give me the creative outlet that I seek. And that's why I write fiction. So that's kind of just it's like a different need I need fulfilled that I don't get through my day job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And it's super interesting. I'm a Gemini moon too. I feel so I can like relate to it on a lot of levels, that especially emotionally, of course, as a moon, it's like, if someone doesn't, or my partner doesn't explain their feelings, it's very hard for me to like understand what's going on. I want it explained.
Right. My son is a Gemini moon, and it's very similar. Like you have to talk it out. You have to talk it out. My sister's a Gemini moon too. they have to talk it out. And like talking is like breathing to a Gemini moon. Like I tell parents of Gemini moon children, let your children talk to you, especially when they're younger, because you want to maintain that openness and receptivity to them. When they're older and they're teenagers, you want them to talk to you, right? So, but yeah, Gemini moon is very important that the parents are like open and receptive. And that can be a lot because they really never stop talking.
Yeah, that's my daughter's a Gemini moon, my youngest.
Yeah, but it's necessary, yeah. So.
Yeah, I so feel that nonstop chattering. I'm sure my husband could tell a lot. And he's Aquarius moon, so that's
a little similar energy. So it's a good.
There's some detached, yeah. But less talking, I feel, from him.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, what is the timeline for your entrance into astrology and you starting law school and fiction? Like, what came first in this journey?
Oh my gosh. So I've always been writing my whole life. And I guess it was like near the end of law school. I don't know why it occurred to me because I was so super busy because my kid was very little. He was like 1 or 2 at the time. And it occurred to me that to actually write down and publish the stories I was thinking about. So after I graduated law school, which was in, I have to think, 2012, I started writing and I published my first fiction novel in 2015. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So, I didn't realize you went to law school with the baby. Like, holy cow.
Yeah. So I had my son, I have to think. I started law school in 2008 and he was born in November 2009 because he's a Scorp. So yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
It was not planned that way, but that's how it happened.
Wow, I mean, I am in awe of you right now. Every parent should be completing law school with a little one is incredible.
I would not recommend, not recommend. I mean, it's possible. It's just like, it's not ideal. I mean, I took time off work, so I didn't have, the day job on top of all that for like the first year of my son's life. But still, it was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. It's totally doable if you have help. It's just, it is a lot to do. But yeah, that's how it turned out.
Yeah, that's a lot to manage. And then with your astrology work, how did you first start did you start first with writing about astrology or working with clients?
Writing. Primarily it's writing. And so first blog posts, then books. And then I started my YouTube channel. So I've been getting a lot of interest from parents on, how to connect with their kids or how to navigate certain transits or how current transits are affecting the kids' behavior, the relationship with their kids. So I do a lot of videos, like YouTube videos on that, like free for parents. So we get a lot of dialogue about, different aspects of kids' personalities and one big question that comes up is kind of how to help siblings, like how to parent siblings using astrology, things like that, and the sibling relationship. So.
Yeah, I love your YouTube channel. You've got a bunch of stuff on there. I recommend anyone watching this should definitely check it out. There's a lot of parenting information on there. I love the video of how to read the children's chart. That's super helpful. That's a good way to break it down.
Good, thank you. It's like the content I post there is really meant for kind of the busy parents who they just don't have the time to read like Jeffrey Wolf Green's like books on Pluto is like 1,000-page book, which are excellent. But if you don't have the time to read that and you still want to use these principles, I'm trying to give you guys like solutions-oriented, actionable help, right? Tips, and to try to explain kind of why these tips are helpful for like Scorpio kids. It's kind of, my kid's a Scorpio sun, so that's one of my areas of expertise is, and as I said in a recent video I did, like, I have never been able to avoid Scorpio people. Like everyone in my family has some Scorpio energy. My father was a Scorpio sun. It's like my sister has Scorpio energy. My mother does. My son does. Just like I can't get away from these people. So my partner does. So it's important to understand the traits and Scorp because they're so, to use Scorpio as an example, because they are so private and secretive. You will always be learning about the Scorpio person in your life. Always, like even when they're adults or even if you've been in a relationship a long time, you're still going to be learning stuff about them because they reveal themselves like infinitesimal piece by piece to you, right? over the long term. So for parents, it's helpful to kind of understand the nature behind why they behave like they do, and then you can use that to, to connect with them.
Yeah.
And that may be different. Like connecting with a Scorpio child may be different from what you would do to connect with a Gemini or an Aries child, right? So that's where it comes. I think that's where it's helpful, where astrology can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's like I keep thinking of it lately as like, it's like, everyone wants a parenting manual and there isn't one, but there actually is one, and it's your child's
Right.
birth chart.
Right. And you want to be careful not to be fatalistic, right? But at the same time, if their sun is in a certain, house and sign, you have a basis to start from here. So
Yeah.
Work from there. Yeah.
And I think I read something on your blog that you had talked about the language of astrology, sort of the emotional language that we get from talking about our children's, placements. I think that that's really interesting, cool, because it really expands the way we think about our children beyond just sort of like, trying to do things because you think there's one way to parent and there's one way for them to be successful, but you can really nuance it.
Exactly. Like I see a lot, I see this come up in parenting groups, not astrology parenting groups, but like general, like positive parenting groups where the parents are like, well, they say things like, if my kid's going to be successful, he's going to have a 9-to-5 job and have a boss. I'm like, no, that's your definition of success. It's chained to a desk, a 9-to-5 job with somebody you report to who you take orders from. That's not my definition of success. Probably not going to be my kids, although I don't want to speak for him. But from the way conversations I have with him, it's probably not going to be what he would be considered successful to have a fulfilling life. And that's the goal, is to have a fulfilling life. It's not to have just material success. Although, maybe I have a Capricorn moon, I like money, that's fine. I mean, but that's fine to like money, I'm not suggesting otherwise. But, that's not the only barometer of success, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about success, I mean personal fulfillment on a soul level. And not everybody seeks that fulfillment the same way. And one of the things I try to drive home with parents is, your child is not you. Your child is different from you. I'm sure they have some similarities because they have half of your DNA, but they're not you. They're not going to have the same opinions, values, and beliefs as you, or want to pursue the same goals as you, and that's fine. It's not your job to raise a carbon copy of you. It's your job to show them the world and guide them toward their own personal fulfillment. I think that's kind of, and it's hard to detach and look at that from a 1,000-foot view when you're mired in the day-to-day kind of quagmire of parenting, right? I've been guilty of that too, where I have to step back and say, wait a minute, why do I want him to do this? I want him to do this because it's good or fulfilling for him, or because I don't want him to do this for whatever reason. So that's kind of what I try to drive home a lot, is like, let your kid follow their own path. And yes, they will need guidance. That's why you're there. But you're not, it's like you introduce them to all the world has to offer, everything the world has to offer. And then you kind of step back and let them decide for themselves what they want to pursue, always letting them know that you are there to help them answer their questions and things like that. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. I love that. And, and even like in terms of material success, right? Some people that earn great material success don't do it by being at this 9-to-5 job. And it's like tapping into your specific skill set is where you're going to find these things,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like something you're passionate about, you're going to do well at it because you have the passion, the drive to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important, the work you're doing about really like helping parents understand that their kids are not exactly who they want to be. And it does kind of like take some of the stress off parenting. I think, when before I had kids and I was pregnant, I was like, okay, my child must sleep in the crib. Which my kids are still in my bed way more than I was, so things were different than planned, but I thought like I had to do all these things. They could never watch TV. They could, and that would be how they become this like awesome, self-developed child. And I wasn't even thinking, like material success, but I think, even like the hippie moms or whatever also think there's like a specific plan. We only do this and that. And you forget that like each child's so unique and they have their own personality coming in. You have to work with them too.
Absolutely. Yep. That's right. I'm an individualist. Like I like to be with myself, work on my own projects, you know, if I'm not with, you know, people closest to me, I like to do that. But like my son is very much like, he has a packed 7th and 11th house. So he's definitely introverted because he needs alone time to recharge, but he'd rather do activities with people than alone. And I'm kind of the opposite. If it's not the people closest to me, I'd rather do something on my own. And I remember when he was younger thinking, why do you need to play video games with people? You can play video games by yourself. I play video games by myself all the time. Or do this by yourself. And then it dawned on me, because I'm projecting my traits onto him.
Yeah.
He likes to do things either with parents or with peers, ideally, right? And he'll take his alone time when he needs it. But generally speaking, he likes to do things with other people. And I had to think, okay, if I had remembered his chart, I looked at it umpteen times, I would have remembered that he has, you know, a 7th house Venus and a 7th house Sun and all these other planets in the 11th house. So he does need the social interaction way more than I do. And that's fine. I just have to remember that he needs that for fulfillment more than I do. And that's okay. And I have to make sure that he gets that he's not just alone, you know, most of the time.
Yeah.
That's like what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like, so it is so powerful as you learn your child's chart, just to be able to have that resource to go to. It's such an amazing tool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to ask you a little bit about some of the key cycles in child development. You know, like the first Saturn square.
Right. So Saturn transits are really important. Actually, recently did a video on the first Saturn square transit. So that happens when the child is about 7. That's a huge developmental stage, because at 7 years old is when children really start to assert their independence and autonomy. And this is something I hammer on in my parenting content in almost every video, that it is essential that parents grant children autonomy and independence, always age appropriate, so that they have some say in what happens to them. So they start to kind of exert the autonomy around age 7 or 8, that first Saturn square transit, which is when, you know, just to bring it down on a basic level, like that's when transit Saturn is at 90 degrees to where Saturn was initially where the child was born, right? So that's when children really start to kind of exert their independence, and they do that first at home with the parents, the safe space, which we would all hope that home is the safe space for the kids. So that's why it's important for parents to let them exert their autonomy, and that includes letting them say no to parents once in a while. We tell my son, we tell him, you can say anything to us, including no, as long as you are civil and respectful. And if we're telling you to do something and you say no, we will have a discussion about it and reach some mutually beneficial outcome, right? But you need to let your kids say no to you and exert their independence, because if you hammer down on them that they have no say in anything that happens to them, that can be very harmful, because that sets the stage potentially for them to grow up into adults that do not stand up for themselves, that do not make their wants and needs known, and who think they have no say in what happens to them. Ask me how I know. That was me for a long time. So I would not want that for anyone. You know, that sets kids up to grow into adults who potentially let other people take advantage of them because they feel they have no say over things that happen to them. That's something I emphasize all the time when I talk to parents and in my videos. You got to let your kids have some say over what happens to them, always in age appropriate way. You can let a 7-year-old choose dinner once in a while, right? Or you can let them decide when during the day they do their homework. If they wait to the last minute, well, then they're rushing and you wait to the last minute. That's on them. Things like that. But you can let them have increasing say over their lives. And when you do that, a lot of the angst goes away because they have some say, right? They have some autonomy. That's a totally normal stage of child development. And with the next Saturn square when they're 14, that's even more emphasized, because now they're teenagers, right? And they're gravitating more toward their peers and they're exerting their independence even more. So if at the Saturn, at the first Saturn square transit around age 7 or 8, if you're really, if a parent responds to the child's need for autonomy with becoming more authoritarian, you're setting the kid up to be oppositional. But the reason they're oppositional is because they want some say in what's happening to them. And all humans want that at some point. Kids are not machines. Kids are humans. They want some autonomy, and you're raising them to be independent emotionally healthy adults at some point. So yeah, the Saturn square trans is something I really talk about because it's just so important to the just cycle of kids' development, like emotional, psychological development. So those are huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how you said, you know, age appropriate, like letting them have their autonomy. And
Right.
there's so many ways I can think of, you know, that you can really like foster that independence at age 7. And in some ways you can do it in ways that's like, you know, helpful to you as well. Like, you know, okay, if you can earn privileges, like you could stay up later than your siblings who are younger if you do your work, or you know, maybe you do the dishes, you finish your chores by
Right.
dinner, then you earn this
Right.
privilege. And then they're like excited about this like autonomy they're earning and
Right.
still
Exactly.
like, working with you.
Right. And sometimes when they help you do stuff around the house at that age, is also giving them self-confidence that they can do stuff.
Yeah.
Right. They can do stuff. Because often I hear a lot from moms, especially, well, it's just easier if I do everything. Yeah, but the point of having a 7-year-old help you do chores is not perfection. It's the process of them doing things, accomplishing things, and learning, oh, I can do this. I remember sending my kid when he was like 6 or 7. I'm like, oh, you want a drink? We're like at Costco, right? Or shopping. Here, go get a drink. Stay in line. I gave him cash and I stood in line. And I could see him from where I was, but he didn't need me to stand in line for him. And he's all excited about taking the money and asking for stuff. It's like he feels very adult doing that.
Yeah.
And it's easier for me. I'm like, go, here's the cash. Go get your whatever. I don't have to do it for you. You can order soda for yourself, right? So things like this. And the funny thing is, like, he's 11 now, right? So he has a debit card that we fund his allowance on. It's just easier for us. I'm like, if you have money on your debit card, you can spend it. If you spend it all and you have zero, we got to wait till the next allowance, right? That's, oh, well.
Yeah.
So, but he's like, oh, I'm going to order one weekend. He's like, I'm going to order pizza for lunch. I'm like, fine. I don't see, I'm going to use my money. I'm like, I don't have any objection to this. Go ahead. So he's like ordering pizza and stuff for himself. And he like feels so adult. He loves it. And that's awesome. So when you let them exert some autonomy, then when you do ask them for help, they're much more willing to do it because they've got the independence. You know what I mean? So it's that, I mean, and what you were saying earlier, it's easier to parent and the household is more peaceful because they have some say in what happens to them. And I'm not going to sit here and say like, you're never going to have disagreements. Sure, you're going to have disagreements. I want to stay up till 11 at night. Well, no, it's a school night. You can't, not tonight. But this weekend you can, you know?
Yeah.
So that's cool. So there's a reason why you can't stay up till 11. It's not that mom is mean and doesn't want you to stay up till 11. It's that you're going to be tired tomorrow and mom's going to be tired tomorrow getting you ready for school. So yeah, but when you give them the independence, like they're just so much willing to work with you on other things.
Okay, so yeah, one question I wanted to ask you about is how you feel. You know, a lot of people when they're first getting into astrology, I found have really like following the moon cycle is a good way to sort of feel into the energies of astrology. And the full moon in children, I mean, more children are born during a full moon. You know, there's all kinds of energy happening during full moons. How do you suggest parents work with that intensified full moon energy?
Right. Well, so the moon's a very fast moving body, right? So you got a full moon about every 30 days. And the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So when you're talking about a full moon, you definitely want to look at the sign the full moon is in. That's going to instruct the energies at play and any other transits. If the moon is squaring some planets, current transiting planets, or planets in your child's chart. But generally speaking, we're talking about full moons, you'll see an intensity of emotions. Definitely, if the moon is the full moon's in a water sign, and or your child has a water sun or moon, you're probably going to have a more emotional child during that time. They may be more. It's definitely been my experience with my child. They're going to be more prone to cry or get upset, and the way you handle that is you do not overreact. You comfort the child. This energy is passing, it's transitory, and it will pass. It won't always be like that. So just recognize that this is how they're feeling now. And one thing I always tell parents, especially parents of water sign children, because the water sign kids identify so strongly with the emotions they're having, you need to help them work through it and articulate and identify the emotions they're having, and also tell them, you are not your emotions. you're a container for the emotions. You're feeling this way now. It's okay. You can feel however you want to feel. You have the right to feel however you want to feel. Just remember that you're not defined by this emotion you're having now. It's not, that's the important thing. You don't identify with just this emotion you're having now, right? So think about it, sit with the emotion, release it. That's the healthy way to deal with emotions, right? So that's what I always tell parents, especially full moon cycles, and adults too will tend to get more emotional. And if the full moon's in a fire sign, you may see it more activity versus more emotion, and or both. And if the moon's in an earth sign, you may see something else. You may feel the need to be more grounded. You may see some emotional sensitivity because the earth signs are feminine energy signs. So it really depends on the sign of the moon, like where it's touching your child's chart, and also look at the house in your child's chart that the transiting full moon is transiting through. So those themes of that house will be emphasized. So those are all things that you want to consider. But remember that the full moon happens once a month, so it's kind of a transitory thing. And the new moons represent beginnings, full moons represent culminations, but it's not always something super, super significant because it happens monthly. It's a monthly cycle, right? Yeah. So those are all things to remember. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on any one transit, right? You have to look at everything that's going on. So yeah, but those are definitely some tips I would recommend.
Yeah, I love that. I've noticed like in the homeschooling since I've started doing that like on full moons, I just try to make it more like a fun day. It seems to be like never productive to do like you're gonna sit down and do all your spelling and writing,
Yeah, that's a good point. It's in my house, it definitely seems like we're more on the kind of relaxation, lethargic side than getting things done. It's just not a day where we're going to get a lot done. And that's fine. You just accept that, you move on, and then when the planets change, transits change, you're going to get more done. Especially because we just had a full moon in Scorpio. None of us felt very productive to do anything. And that's, you just let it go and you deal with the energy you have. So we say all the time, right? You flow with the energy and you're going to have a way easier time of things. You just flow with the energy. And if the energy is telling you to just take it slow, then just take it slow. There will be a time when you're going to amp up the productivity and the activity. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, and that's what like the gift of starting to learn about astrology and your child's chart is. It lets you really flow with where they're at, where you're at.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And so, and one thing I want to like, how do you balance all this, as a parent with your work and your legal work, your astrology work, your writing, and being a mom?
Right. It's tough. I have help. That's good. It's always good to have help. I let a lot of things go, like a lot of chores. I let things like dishes, laundry. I'm like, we'll get to this eventually. We have to change this light bulb, whatever. We'll get to this eventually. Right. So I let a lot of those little things go. Like I'm not up till 3 a.m. doing laundry and dishes. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. Also, like I always, and I have not always been good about this in the past. I've had to like constantly remind myself to do this, to prioritize the relationships, like the relationship with my partner, the relationship with my kid, prioritize those and the connection over other things. And like I said, I've not always been good about doing that. I've had to remind myself to do that sometimes. So, but prioritize the connection, the relationship over other things. Like for example, my son, it's like, can you watch this program with me? Well, I'm thinking I have 20 things I really need to do, but I don't need to do any of them right now. I'm like, yeah, I'll watch this program with you. I'll sit and I'll watch a program with you. And I just like that kind of spending time with your kids in a pressure-free way where there's no pressure to do anything. You're just like occupying the same space. That's still bonding. Even if you're talking minimally, you're still bonding because you're doing something with them. And he's done that since he was a baby. Asked me to read with him, asked me to sit with him while he's going to sleep, asked me to watch TV with him because he likes to do things with people, rather than alone most of the time. So almost all the time, I'll drop what I'm doing unless it has to be done right now, which is rare, and sit with him, or hang with my partner or whatever, because you want to take advantage of the time you have together, right? And especially with your kids, they're not always going to be there
Yeah.
So how much time do you have with them? So I always think, at the end of the day, okay, I haven't done this, haven't done this, but I did prioritize these connections, make time for these connections and to do things. So I always think about that. I always think about the big picture. So like I tell people, at the end of my life, am I going to remember? If I going to think, oh, I'm so happy I took all that extra time to like do dishes and no. so I let a lot of things go that a lot of people probably would feel like they have to do, but that's just how I operate. It's kind of how I prioritize.
And I like that you highlighted, like, as a tip, like low pressure time with the kids, like watching a show with your kids is time with your kids.
Yeah, it's time. It's still quality time because you laugh at the show, you comment on it together, you're kind of snuggling together. That's bonding time. Even if you're not like doing anything productive, bonding time doesn't have to be productive stuff where you're like creating a project or doing a craft. That's cool too, but it can be just this low pressure time where you're just, like I say, occupying the same space, right? They know you're there, and that's still important, even though you're not necessarily interacting that much.
Yeah, and that's great because with working moms, it's so hard. There's so much guilt. I think a lot of times, like, I don't have all these crafts for my kids and all these extra like activities. Like, am I being a good mom? You know,
or I'm too tired to do this right now, or I'm too tired to like bake or whatever. Yeah, it's definitely something that comes up. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm also just curious, like, as being, with all the things you have going on, like, what do you use for like a planning situation? Do you like, how do you do that?
Talking about this morning, actually, we were just talking about, my partner and I were like, we have like, he's like, I have like 3 different to-do lists. I'm like, I know, I have 5 different to-do lists. I have to find a way to consolidate all of them, right? So yeah, I do to-do lists. I have like an app in my phone I use to plan stuff, and I have a calendar. So, and one good thing about technology is that you can automate stuff. You can use, for my blog, you can automate scheduled posts. You can automate when the post is published, it automatically gets distributed to all your social media. So I take advantage of all that, right? Because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. But yeah, so I do a combination of like new tech and old tech. So I'll do that stuff, like the automated apps and software, and the scheduling app for my phone, and then I'll do like my Llewellyn's like astrology calendar on paper. I have that because then I have the transits and I have my to-do list, like what is being scheduled this day, what do I have to do this day before this happens, and then I have like my really old school just notebook where I just list stuff out, because stuff will occur to me throughout the day. Oh yeah, I gotta do this. If I need a way to record it immediately before I forget. So I do a combination of stuff. It's kind of like the typical Gemini, like a little bit scattered. It works for me, so I wouldn't recommend that for everybody. Like probably a Virgo would be really just like, would not find that helpful, but it works for me for the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I also have to do like a variety of things. I have like I have my physical, my phone, and my fridge. Like I need all those.
Right.
But then the problem is when you don't update to each one, then you get so.
Yeah, I've done this, but I get to check it off now, so that's good. Yeah, that's happened too.
Yeah, and I like how you talked about, getting help. So like, like hiring babysitters, or some people, it might be hiring a house cleaner or finding whatever you can outsource to do.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, like hiring somebody to take care of the lawn, hiring a house cleaner. I have no qualms about contracting out for that stuff. Sometimes we do it ourselves, sometimes we contract it out. Kind of depends what our schedules are like, but how easy the task is to do, or whether it's something we like to do. But yeah, I'm a big fan of outsourcing stuff that you really don't like to do to focus on the stuff you do like to do. I mean, so to the extent that you can, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's important for people to realize like you can and you need to, as you like grow in your business, in your work.
Right.
You can't.
One other thing we do is we like order the meal kits. So we have everything brought to us, and that takes a lot of pressure off meal planning, meal prep, and grocery shopping. And yeah, it's a little more expensive, but now we have extra time that we were doing meal planning and meal prepping and grocery shopping that we don't have to do. So it's kind of like how much, you get that time back. So what's the monetary value of you getting the time back versus what you're paying for the meal kit? So you kind of have to weigh that. but for us, it's totally worth it. So
Yeah.
at the time, yeah.
I love that. I think that, yeah, anytime we can think about ways to just like make the burden less, it's just so much to be a mom and then have a business and be your legal
Oh yeah.
work.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And yeah, so I'm also wondering a little bit about how your writing process works.
So writing like novels or
Both. So like, your fiction and the Scorpio and Gemini books you've written about children.
Right.
How do
So, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, how did you go from like birth of an idea to actually getting it done? And then maybe we could talk a little bit about the publishing process and advertising.
So for the parenting book, so I have currently 2 out, as you said, one on Scorpio children, one on Gemini children. For the nonfiction stuff, basically, like my process is you just do kind of a data dump, right? So you're just writing. And then when you feel like, I mean, you can write forever, really. So you have to at some point stop and then organize what you've written. And then I try to organize those books, because those are shorter, into sections, because we were talking about this earlier. The kind of the main goal with the parenting books is to have them in kind of like easily digestible chunks, so that the busy parent can read them and then have the tips and have the summaries right there, so they can easily go to find what they're looking for. So those I kind of organize into sections. And then basically I give a lot of actionable tips on here are the main traits for Gemini children or Scorpio children, remembering that, there are could be other planetary energies at play here. We're talking mainly about like Scorpio sun and moon children, Gemini sun and moon children. And here are the main traits. Here are kind of why they may act as they do, and here are how you can bond with these kids, right? For like a stronger and more peaceful and ultimately, more fulfilling parent-child relationship. So that's kind of, that's basically like, I just write, kind of dump all the data and then organize it. I don't know how else to explain it.
No, I like that. That's helpful, because I think people get so lost. It's like, and there could be different ways, but
it's hard to start. I think that's the most difficult thing, is like, you just write until basically you've said everything you think you have to say on the subject. We're talking about nonfiction, and then you organize what you have, and I'm sure I could have added stuff, and maybe I'll do, other additions in the future, but you have to stop at some point, because otherwise you're going to write forever.
Well, I actually loved the way your books were organized when I was reading through it, because it just flowed very like naturally, and it wasn't divided into just like, I don't know, sometimes I've read astrology books, it's more like, okay, so more technical almost. Like this was very much like for the parent, like how do you understand the child? And that seems super helpful. And the examples you used. So I was kind of wondering, like, did you, after you data dumped, did you pull in your examples like in the later process of your editing and writing out the whole thing?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, if something occurred to me while I was like writing everything out, I would stick it in there and like develop it later. But for the most part, they came after. And those are all examples from like either my life or life of like friends with their kids that were told to me. So those are all like real life examples.
It's great, because it's such a good mix. And with, I think, you like your academic background, you did a really good job of like, citing like this astrologer says this about it, and so it's a good mix, and it's not like over the head. If you don't know astrology, the books are still incredibly helpful. Like you don't need to know astrology to read them.
Good, thank you. That was kind of the goal. Like even for the parent who knows nothing about astrology, I wanted to like impart some value. Ultimately be helpful to them.
And then for the parents who do understand astrology, it's also really helpful because of, especially I think, like bringing in those astrologer pieces. Like I was like, oh, I need to go back and look at that idea, and think more about some of these discussions on Pluto, for example. And so that's super helpful.
It's really easy to go like down in the rabbit hole when you're talking about like Plutonian and Scorpio energy. It's really easy to do. I'm done. So I mean, any book on Pluto, Jeffrey Wolf's Green stuff is good. Anything by Robert Hand, Stephen Arroyo does a lot on like relationship astrology, which is helpful for parents and children. So you could really, I mean, and the thing is, there's so much information out there on astrology that it's hard, I think, to kind of pinpoint the stuff that's really valuable from the stuff that's more fly by night.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I'm hoping to give people, like, these are books that I recommend and that other astrologers I respect recommend, right? Not just, I don't know, you can't think of anything or any author in particular, but there are, some books and some websites that are just more fly by night. And we get questions in the parent, in Dominique's parenting group about, well, I read this and I read that it's going to mean my child has such and such impairment. Okay. Yeah. Don't diagnose any impairment from a birth chart, please. Right? Yeah. Yes, there is a medical astrology field, but let's not be too predictive and fatalistic. I've heard of astrologers I've heard of people getting readings from astrologers, not anyone I know, but astrologers who say, oh, this particular event is going to happen. You got to be really careful about saying something like that. I mean, so I would not recommend that. So you really, you want to stick to the respected sources. And that's what I try to do. At least if you want to know more about this, here are the books I recommend. Obviously you can read any book you want, but these are the ones that will bring you some value.
No, it's great. It's a really good foundational way for those who want to go further, like to trace back your citations is, I think, really, really good. Yeah. So I loved that about those books. And then I guess since we're doing nonfiction, I'll keep going with the nonfiction. And so after you wrote your books and you decided to publish them, so you did, how did you go about that process?
Right. So it's a little like baptism by fire. You kind of like I self-published my first book, which is a fiction book, in 2015. So it's kind of like you don't know what you're doing. So you're just learning as you go. And I've learned a lot since then about everything, about how to write blurbs, about cover design, about marketing, about all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, the self-publishing process, there's so much involved in it. I actually have published like a short self-publishing guide. It's on Amazon if you look for my name, which I think is like 99 cents right now. So, but that's kind of an extended outline on, you're a new author, you want to self-publish for the first time, here's everything you need to know. And it doesn't really go into detail on the promotional stuff. That's a whole different ballgame, but there are plenty of sites that will help you. They have a lot of free advice, quality advice on promotion, on writing book blurbs, on cover design, things like that, economical cover design. So yeah, I mean, the thing with self-publishing is you get to keep all royalties, which is fantastic. The other thing is you're doing all the work. So you're, contracting out, I don't design covers, so I contract out to somebody to design my covers, right? To a graphic designer. You have to hire an editor, you have to hire contractors, do all these things, right? Hire a proofreader or proofread yourself if you want. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's like a whole another topic, but yeah, you're basically, the easiest way is to kind of start self-publishing on the main retailers. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, maybe Kobo, maybe, Audible if you're doing audio books and things like that. So it's free to self-publish via them. You're just uploading files and uploading covers and things like that. But yeah, so the process is pretty straightforward, but there's a lot you have to consider from a marketing standpoint. Like your cover's got to be right for the genre. The font, you need to be able to make the cover and the font so that people can read the thumbnail or view the thumbnail of your cover when they're looking on their cell phone, things like that. You need to take into consideration. I didn't know when I self-published my first book that I learned since then. So that's one of the reasons I did the self-publishing guide, was these are things you're going to have to know that I had to teach myself to do, right? Buy an ISBN for your book if you want one, things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I really feel like self-publishing is such a great way to make use of the way the world is now and retain your rights to your stuff.
Right. Right. And more authors are electing to continue self-publishing than to go to traditional publishing. This comes up in my author groups all the time. Like, people ask, why are you traditionally published? And people will say, there's really no benefit to it. I mean, you're getting a very small amount of the royalties. Traditional publishers are not good at predicting what book is going to sell well. They're really not good at it. It's very hard to do. And also, the traditional publishers will really only market your book the first 6 weeks after publication. After that, you're the one who's going to be marketing your book. So you're going to be marketing and promoting your book on your own, including building your own mailing list whether you're self-published or traditionally published. So if you're doing the work, why would you sign over 80% of the royalties? That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of work, but the rewards are much greater too. And, if you're a self-published author who sells really well, and there have been plenty of self-published books, like 50 Shades of Grey was one that was self-published, and it was picked up later by publishing houses because it sold so well. So that's something to consider too. I know authors who make a living from writing, from publishing fiction, and they self-published books, and then those books were really popular, and they had publishers calling them to then pick those books up for traditionally, to be traditionally published. And they were already making enough money that it was worthwhile for them to kind of contract out that stuff, right? Contract out all the publication. So yeah, so there are various ways of going about it. But yeah, bottom line, more and more authors are sticking with being self-published. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I do too. And also there's like, especially with astrology books, sometimes as I've gotten into this like lately, looking at a lot of the older books and stuff, I kind of like love book collecting. And I realized how many went out of print and that are good,
Yeah.
And so like self-published, you don't have that problem because it's on demand. That's great.
Right, exactly. That's right.
So that's kind of a cool feature. And yeah, I think it's awesome. So I'd like to know a little bit about the difference between your fiction writing process and your nonfiction writing process.
Right. So for fiction writing, I outline a lot more. So they're usually longer books. Like my nonfiction books are maybe 12,000 words each. So they're meant to be kind of for the busy pairing. So fiction novels are like around 60,000 to 80,000 words, which is on the average to long end for novels. So yeah, so I outline a lot more. I'll generally have in mind the plot summary, whether it's like I write standalone books and I write series too. So I'll generally have the plot summary, so I'll outline that, and then I'll usually just like fill it in with scenes, and then I'll organize the scenes like, okay, this needs to come after this needs to come after this, or whatever. So it's generally an extended outline, and then I'll fill it in gradually, if that makes sense. And then and in that process, I end up cutting a lot because invariably you just have way more stuff. Like you dump way more stuff into the manuscript, and then you got to clean it up later. And I try to write efficiently and economically so that there's no extraneous info. It's like just the action, because I try to make the books very readable. And like my earlier books, I think I could have cut more stuff out. So my later fiction novels are definitely more efficiently written, in the sense that it's just more about moving the story along. Anything that doesn't move the story along, you want to ask yourself, why is this in here? Is it moving the plot along, or is it like a necessary detail? So I think a lot of authors put like a lot of, and Stephen King talks about this in his book On Writing, which is really good. A lot of authors put a lot of extra material in there that they really don't need to include. So I ask myself, do I really need this in here? Is it moving the story along, or is it just is it a necessary detail? And if it's not, even though it pains me sometimes, the delete scenes is like a big joke authors have. Like, we want to keep all this stuff, but it's not all relevant to the story. So you jet it, right? So that's a big process of it. And editing is, I love writing. Editing is not so much. It's harder to do. But yeah, so that's generally the process. I'm more of an outliner than like a write by the seat of my pants. A lot of authors do that too, but generally like to start with like a really detailed outline.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because I've kind of found in mine, I have not like published any fiction or anything, but maybe it's just the way I've done fiction is more of like an outlet. I tended to be more like a dumper of fiction,
right?
And an
a lot of authors are. Yeah.
But I've yet to really think out, like I've never done a fiction novel, and I love that. Makes so much sense. Like, yet you would write out the entire plot,
right?
And
right.
Really,
generally, and a lot of the times you're writing the book, and the plot will change, and that's just how it is. And like what we say, you go where the writing takes you. You know, flow with the energy, right? If it's taking you in a different direction, just go with that. And that happens. Sometimes the characters take on a life of their own, and you're like, well, they want to do this, so this is just what comes naturally to me now, so we're going to write it this way. And then you can always change it. Just save what you write, and everything you take out of the manuscript you can save in a separate file. You don't have to get rid of anything you've written. So you can always like rework that. The stuff that doesn't make it into the novel, you can rework it later for like a short story or a teaser or a prequel. Those are all good things to think about.
Yeah, I love that. You've got so much creativity and wealth of knowledge on this entire writing process. It's so interesting to me. And I also like, so I just thought, do you like think about the astrology signs like of your characters, like as you're creating them?
So I didn't used to. I do now. The fiction novel I'm working on now. It very much like plays a role in the narrative, so that's going to be interesting. It's like the first time where I'm actually incorporating it in the narrative.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. Yeah, because the main character is psychic, so it's going to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like it's an action, like a romantic suspense action. So it's going to be like way more involved. Yeah.
I am excited to read that. That sounds so interesting.
It's fun to write. It's been fun to write. But yeah, I've tabled it for the past couple of weeks. I'm working on like my parenting content. It's just not enough time for everything. So, but yeah, I'm very excited about it. I've got a good part of it written already. So yeah.
That's exciting. And another question is we were like think about juggling life, work, mom. Like how do you actually find the time to do writing? Do you like schedule a time? Do you just work when you can?
I pretty much like have a word goal certain days. Like certain days I'll be like, today I need to record videos. I'm going to record content. And so today I need to write. So I'm going to write like 500 words or 1,000 words. So it's usually I have like a word goal rather than a time goal. Or although sometimes I'll do sprints with other authors, like we're going to sprint for 15 minutes and just write as much as we can in 15 minutes. And then that's kind of nice because then you report back to each other like what you've done. So you have kind of
that's cool.
accountability. But yeah, and then sometimes I'll be like, okay, this weekend I'm just going to write, like a writing retreat at home. I'm just going to write like and take breaks. So I read in a productivity book that I read a while ago that it's good to like focus intensely on something for 45 minutes and then take a 5 to 10 minute break where you're doing something other than looking at a screen. So that's actually, having done that, that's actually very beneficial because when you're doing a 45-minute chunk of like this intense focus in flow state, you know that in 45 minutes, you're going to have a break. And like, I'm more of a sprinter than a marathoner. So that's very helpful for me. Okay, we have a break in 45 minutes. Then you kind of focus, you come back and you write for another 45 minutes. And then after like 3 or 4 blocks, you take like maybe an hour break, right? Where you're not looking at a screen. So that's very helpful too. Like if I have like a whole day or half day to myself, I would do that. That's something I recommend, I find helpful. Especially like if you're a parent who has other stuff, like finding chunks of time is important. You're just not gonna have like 6 hours at a time.
Yeah.
To devote. So, but you can find like half an hour or 15 minutes, right? And then just focus. If you can intensely focus for like the half hour, you'd be surprised how much you can get done if you're just focusing on that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, those are great tips for any parent who's thinking of getting into writing, like either creatively or professionally.
Right. Like I'll stay up late at night, sometimes to like 1 or 2 writing. So I'm more of a night owl, but I've known parents to like get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and get in an hour of writing before the kids wake up. I've known parents to do that too. So, I mean, and either one of those things will work too. Like sometimes you have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep, but you're at least getting something done and you can edit it later, but getting the words down is like the most important thing, I think. It's easier to edit later.
Yeah, I'm definitely a night owl. So I'm like you. I'm like, okay, everyone's in bed. Like, this is my time.
Right. This is my time. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And what's your, like, how do you think that your astrology chart, if you don't mind, like personally affects the way you write?
Oh, wow.
That's kind of a big question.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I have three personal planets in Gemini, so Sun, Mercury, and Venus. I love to write. I've always loved to write. So it's like 11 or 12. Like I've just always written like short stories and some poems, and I've always liked to write. So that definitely, I'm just very motivated to do it because it's something I like to do, right? It's hard to me because it's something you don't particularly like to do. So I like to do it. Other than that, definitely with the parenting content, definitely I've got like a 4th house moon right in the IC. So like my childhood very much informed a lot of my adult struggles. Like one of the ways I originally got into astrology was using it to kind of reparent myself after childhood trauma. That takes a lot of emotional capital to do, but the way I see it, like astrology, like one more tool in your toolbox of self-help, including psychotherapy and self-help books, anything else you find beneficial. It's like one more tool, right? So, so definitely like that, my fourth house moon is very much a part of, it also kind of forms a part of a grand cross in my chart. So I have a grand cross with, see if I can remember, Saturn opposing the moon and then Uranus and Chiron. So very much like I have a first house Uranus. So I definitely have to do my own thing. Like I don't like being chained to a desk or being on someone else's schedule. I like doing my schedule and my thing. So that's very much, yeah, it comes into play. Yeah. I definitely like, if you read my parenting content, like my own childhood very much informs a lot of my recommendations. Like, here's what didn't work. And I can tell you it didn't work because I experienced it and I had to decondition and recondition myself. So yeah, that definitely, my own childhood like informs a lot of my writing. Yeah. The nonfiction writing. Yeah.
And I think that makes it super powerful because, you know, you can see like you've done the work and you're doing the work.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to do. Like in I have a general parenting book coming out this year. And I say that, I'm like, look, it's hard to reparent yourself when you're parenting minor children. That takes a lot of emotional energy to do, but it's necessary and you're going to be more fulfilled for it. And one of the good things that comes out of that is you really are more able to focus on what's really important. Like you just let a lot of stuff go. I mean, what's important for me is the relationship regarding parenting, the relationship with my kid, that he is comfortable coming to me and talking to me about anything, that he feels safe, that he feels heard, that he feels loved and supported unconditionally. Like the rest of the stuff, yeah. Did he forget to do a chore? Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, he forgot. It's not a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. I don't place a lot of value on like abject obedience because I believe if you have a strong relationship, the kids naturally want to help you. That's been my experience. So
yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think it's, you know, that's what really got me to go like public with my astrology stuff was the self-work I was doing was so informed from my background and my astrology work that I've been doing with friends and family forever. But I was like, I really need to bring this out because I want to share with as many people as I can how important it is to like your journey in healing. It's just such a good tool to add to it. Really is incredibly powerful as a self-development tool.
And like you said, you're going to have an easier time parenting.
Yeah.
You follow a lot of these, you know, concepts and you allow your child to intrinsically be how they are. You do not force them to fit into a mold that you are thinking about. Right. So you're going to have an easier time parenting. You're going to enjoy the relationship with your child more. That's going to create more positive moments and that's going to help your child bond to you more. So
yeah. And who doesn't want that, right? Like
absolutely, yeah. That's exactly right. When kids have a strong bond with parents is when they can blossom and flourish and go out and be independent and emotionally healthy in the world because they have that stable base, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. I love that, and it's just so. Yeah, it's so exciting to see this like sort of rise I see in like parenting and astrology as a tool that can be used and people discovering it. I'm excited to see like our children being raised with this sort of awareness provides such powerful possibilities for them.
Oh, it's fantastic. Like my kid and I talk about astrology all the time. And I'm like, this is, you know, one more thing to think about that's going to help you, right? It's not the only thing, but it's going to help you. And you have, like you talk and use the language with them and that they're informed. It's so awesome that they're informed early.
Yes. And even, I mean, this is a little bit different, but I use, because since I'm homeschooling and like teaching them about astrology, like combining it with my space and like mythology stuff is such a really cool way to get like a foundational understanding of mythology, like which is key to like, I think knowing everything basically in our culture, like the references you can get from that if you start young is just like mind blowing.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's like, so yeah. And I think for parents as well, I mean, you know, just your own journey and like learning how to work with the energies that, you know, you had in your childhood and going through that work, which is not easy, but it's key to break the chains to traumas and all that, so you can really be the parent that you want to be, not just repeat what happened.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if you have, we'll start probably wrapping up here, but first, what is your biggest thing coming out? What would you like to share with people?
Sure. So I've got a lot of new content coming up on my YouTube parenting channel. Got a lot of stuff on Scorpio, Gemini, and Aquarius kids in particular, because those are some of my areas of expertise. My sister's an Aquarius too. So, and then I've got like a general parenting book coming out, which is called, the provisional title is like Stop Parenting from a Place of Ego. So it brings in astrology. It's not only about astrology, it's about like positive parenting with some astrology concepts like soul needs over ego needs and things like that. So very excited about that. That's I'm actually in the process of editing that now. That'll be out this year sometime. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, I'm working on my next fiction novel, which, as we were talking about, like the main character is psychic. So bring in some astrology transits and concepts into that. So very excited about that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. And so if people want to find you, where should they go?
Sure. So you can search for my name on YouTube, my YouTube channel. I'm on Facebook. It's Positive Parenting with Astrology. My blog is lawschoolheretic.com. I've got a parenting and astrology page there with a lot of posts and my videos. So any of those places, and you can email me directly at maria@lawschoolheretic.com.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone check it out. You're going to learn a lot. Her books, and you can get the books on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yeah, print and ebook, right?
Yeah.
Or ebook.
Yeah, and you don't need to know astrology to go into it. But if you do know astrology, I feel like you're going to just get even more out of it, especially with the way it's written with such like a good foundation. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us today. And I am Mystic Megan, and I'm starting this program where I'm trying to bring in, astrologers and people that I think are going to be really enlightening to your journey to self-growth. And if anyone's interested in learning more about parenting and astrology, I'm offering a course that's opening May 11th online. And you can find all my stuff on mysticmegan.com. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stop the recording. How do I do this? I think